Hey there, I am Finn Deerhart, and I am with the recently published Miss Dr. Holly Richmond, not Miss, Ms. Dr. Holly Richmond, author of Reclaiming Pleasure, a sex positive guide for moving past sexual trauma and living a passionate life. And I always have to read that tag. But this book is awesome. So if you are a survivor, or if you are an ally of a survivor, or if you just want to be more informed about the cultural climate around the sexual harrowing experiences that people are going through, I think this book is really awesome for, and also just beyond sexual trauma. I kind of feel like this is really important information about just trauma in general for me. So awesome book. Hi, Holly.
Hey, Finn. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for that introduction. Yes, so thank you. It is a trauma book. And I don't know if you feel like this, but I wanted it to be a hopeful book, like not a sad, depressing book. And yes, there are a ton of case studies in it, just so it's relatable. Um, but I want people to feel more up. It's called Reclaiming Pleasure. Like that's really where we're going. There's a lot of sex therapy in there. There's a lot of trauma, but towards the end, it's more sex therapy. So I loved how you kind of qualified that. So thank you.
Yeah, and to your point about the tone or like the voice, like I kind of describe it like it's like sitting across from you having tea with you.
Yeah.
That's how I felt like reading, and I do know you, and so
Yeah.
there's a kind of like a recognition of your voice. But when I was reading this, and I think this is important for anyone reading it, it really feels like they're connecting with you. I think the reader can kind of connect personally with you. It doesn't feel like an omniscient voice of expertise out here. It's like expertise right here in front of you, holding you, having a
Mm,
little chat, and a feeling of like warmth. So that was how I felt reading it, and I've heard that as well from other people.
yeah. And that's what I want. That's, people remember stories, not theories. So that's what I wanted to offer. And my heart has been in this work for a long time. So I'm glad that it comes through.
Yeah, there's actually a phrase in here that I have. It's like, that was then, this is now. That was then, this is now. This like mantra, and that's stuck with me ever since. And I've actually found myself saying that in many instances since I read the book. It's been a couple weeks since I finished the book, and that phrase really sticks in my mind. It's so important.
It's a huge piece of healing, right? Because so much of trauma, it's trauma too much too soon. And
Mhm.
then we live as if it's still happening. So we're either living as if it's still happening or we're living as if the worst will happen. So
Totally.
so much is just like staying in this present moment, which is easier said than done. But yeah,
It's like the human dilemma, right?
yeah.
I feel like
Stay
I don't want to be
here.
overly reductive, but I kind of feel like so many, almost, I don't know, dare I say, everything kind of comes down to like presence, and then what's available in the moment based on presence versus like a perception, and a filtered perception.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. So thank you. I'm so excited to be here, and I know we are talking about fun things today. Fun, interesting,
Totally,
complex. Yes.
totally. We're talking about dicks.
Yeah.
I love you're like complex, but they are, and are they? They are. Yes, they are. So, okay. So what is my dick trying to tell me is what we're discussing. So I think this, my feelings, that men are often so consumed by fear about their dicks in every way. Like what the size, what they do, like how quickly they do it, all the things, which puts it in an abstract kind of like disembodied place already in the mind, how we imagine the cock. But when dicks don't function in alignment with expectations, men trend toward the assumption that something is wrong instead of inquiring more deeply about what makes them feel erotic or actually connected to their cocks. And so I wanted to really get your perspective about this. It's existential, like something, about connection, and bringing a context of like, this cock is part of my whole being, versus when do we actually might think something might be wrong, quote unquote.
Right. Right.
I think it's a really
And
helpful filter.
yeah, absolutely. Because it's there's the function, but then there's also the meaning. So when men come to me in my practice with any kind of erectile function issues, of course I'm going to send them to a urologist or an MD first because we have to verify, right? So is there really a physiological issue going on here? Is it a matter of function? Is it testosterone? So let's check that out. 90% of the time, it's not that. So
Yeah.
it's about the meaning. And I think that's what I'm excited to talk with you about today is this, more of the somatic psychology of the meaning our body, the messages our body are giving us. But Finn, the first question that you and I threw back and forth when we were working on this talk were the real reasons, the true reasons to be worried about your dick. So I wanted to dive into that first, if that's okay, because
Please.
totally legit.
Yeah.
Pain. So the first thing I want to say, if you are
Oh,
in any kind of pain, please, like, do not ever ignore that. So this could be a pain when you're getting an erection. It can, and this pain can be in your dick, in your balls, in your inner thighs. I've seen men with all these kind of problems. That's really, this is something that has to be checked out. This is not a
hmm.
meaning existential piece. And then also, if there's been a dramatic change, so if your erectile function was this, and then all of a sudden it's not, something dramatic has changed and there's nothing that you can really point to that has caused that change, that's worthy of concern too. The other thing I look at and always check out with my men or my people with dicks is what happens when you're partnered versus what happens when you're masturbating. Because
Totally.
most often, like when they're masturbating, they're like, oh my God, rock hard, totally great orgasms, but put me with a partner and nothing works. Okay, then we're back to meaning. We're back to anxiety, not a matter of function. So I never want to diminish that there could be a physiological functional issue. So don't minimize that for yourself if that's what's going on.
Totally. And I love that inquiry. And it's interesting because I don't think a lot of men think about that. They're like, because there's so much pressure around maybe validating or being perceived as something when they're with a person, so that there's a lack of connection to their actual body,
Yeah,
versus when they're by themselves, they're like, oh no, I'm fine there. I'm like, well, but don't see, your penis works, like it's working fine in certain contexts. It's, quite enjoyable for you, but in other contexts it's like you can't even identify with it. Maybe
right, right. Yeah,
becomes a
yeah,
concept, like a, yeah, it's like this compartmentalized concept, like I think of it like almost like floating out here for a lot of people, like my dick, versus like, no, this is like my body, my energy, my beingness. You talk a lot about the non-duality of
mhm.
sexuality, like it is who we are. So
It absolutely is who we are. But boy, reconciling that, that can be a tough one.
for the
So
men especially, right?
oh, for men especially, because what does it mean if it's not as big as I want it to be? What does it mean if it's not working when I'm with my partner? What does it mean if my partner's a man? What does it mean if my partner's a woman? Like, there's so many different spaces to hold if things aren't going how we think they should go.
Totally. And even for men too, and I do want to make sure that it's empathized with, that men have not been helped to be in touch with their feelings unless it's anger or some sort of competitive
Yeah.
feeling, but vulnerability and like a sensitivity to softer, emotional experiences, they're not as helped there. So when that arises, the first tendency is to kind of try to outperform. So then it's like, something's wrong with my dick and I'm gonna like try to fuck harder, be more, butch it up kind
Yeah.
of.
Yeah.
And that's gonna actually make it, I think, worse.
Yeah.
You kind of
Yeah.
puts you in a headspace of performance versus like, what is happening for me? That leads me to this. You talk about it a lot, and I love this, the pro-symptom approach.
Mhm.
So can you share a little bit about how that might relate to when something, we've ruled out medical issues? How do we look at like, what's my dick telling me through that lens?
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly it. I'll never forget in my somatic psychology program, a professor talking about this very somatic approach of what is my body saying that I cannot? What is my body saying that I cannot? So when we really start to take in the meaning, slow things down, most of the time when men come to me and there's something going on with their dick that they're not happy about, it's anxiety. Might be depression, but it's usually anxiety. Sometimes I love it when it's as simple, and I'm not minimizing, but it's as simple as a performance issue. So they grew up watching porn.
Yeah.
I love porn, you love porn. We also love knowing that it's not sex education, right? It's like
Anti-sex education.
education,
It's like the
right?
opposite.
It's the opposite. It's great, but it's entertainment, not education at all. So when they say, well, I thought I was supposed to be 12 inches long and be able to fuck for an hour, I'm like, okay, 5.5 inches is the normal, and 5 to 7 minutes of penetration is the average. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, so is there a problem? They're like, no. I'm like, great, off you go.
Oh wow. And they're that quickly resolving.
Yeah, just because the expectations are so out of whack. I don't even know how to say it. Do you not experience that? Do you feel like most men are like, this is, I know what average is, I know what normal is, or do they think they're supposed to be able to do something else?
They have zero idea, and there's always like your online stats versus like your true stats. Like in
Yeah.
profiles, there's I would say a variant of like 2 inches or so because of this enormous pressure to be something or mean something. That's all it's constructed, and it's really about I think just values that are patriarchal values. I mean, there's a thing about big dicks, right? So big dicks create physical intensity.
Yeah.
And so often there's like this, like, I guess, what's the word? It's like that's the priority, is physical intensity,
Mhm.
but that's only one facet of an experience. And so I've actually had, personal experiences where there was like maybe a guy had his finger inside me and it felt amazing. And that was like the precursor to him putting his dick in me. And then it was like actually less pleasurable. Something changed where I was like, I'm not feeling as connected anymore. And to me, that was like this like counter evidence about like, okay, so there's some times where big dicks feel amazing, and then there's other times where they don't at all, and there's just like no connection at all, or it's not even what I want to be doing, maybe. So there's so much going on in a sexual experience. And so men hanging up on function and performance is like really, I think, doing a disservice to like what's actually happening inside of me. And that's really, I think, the bulk of my work is trying to help men figure out, like, when you're doing something with your body or your penis, like what are you trying to express?
Mhm.
Like, what part of yourself are you trying to show? Like, what are you trying to communicate to this person? And so there's so many ways to create intensity. So that's just my thoughts about that. And so men, back to this piece around the online measurements,
Yeah.
there's this assumption of like what is the standard. It's very porn influenced, but it's also just kind of like, I think, an emotionally influenced piece around being the best, being better, being competitive, being,
Yeah.
versus just like feeling,
Yeah.
you know.
I mean, and then so what is my body saying that I cannot? So there's the performance piece, but if there's really erectile function issues, so early ejaculation, inability to maintain an erection, we just that deep dive into asking what's happening here. So what is that anxiety about? What are you afraid will happen?
Mhm.
So a lot of times I'm not going to be good enough. I'm going to be rejected. I'm not going to be what my partner needs me to be. I don't know how to do it well. There's this balance of psychology and education here that we've been talking, I've been talking about for the last 5 minutes that can't be overlooked.
Totally. And I think when that happens, again, excluding physical
Yeah.
true issues, it's like something's not functioning with my dick in the way that I want. So what's that message? And quite often it's a message that you've been carrying your whole life already. It's like, I'm a disappointment. No one will ever respond to me. I've lived alone. The existential pieces that we all have to grapple with. And I love Irvin Yalom's 4 existential pieces, like the crisis of like meaning and lack of connection, death fear. There's another
Yes.
one. What's the
Yeah.
other
Yeah. Yeah. I
one?
think you got them.
Freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom.
Freedom, isolation, lack of meaning, death.
So when
Yes.
someone's like, often there's here's a thing that I encounter quite frequently with men, is they have been working just fine. Their body is, they're not questioning anything, and they actually are not in touch with those deeper layers of fear. And so then they get into a relationship, they get married, or they move in, especially when they move in with each other. Then
Hmm.
suddenly it's like, I don't have a way to preserve a sense of who I am anymore. And so then suddenly their dick starts kind of like not responding so much. And for a lot of guys, I've actually, that's what they've kind of worked into, like, oh, I'm actually kind of scared of like being owned and not being autonomous. Have you encountered that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for my gay or queer clients that are in that situation, their dick works fine when they're doing the random hookups at the club or wherever, right? And I don't know if that's true in your
Yeah.
case, but it's
Yeah.
just it's so I want to say it's so clear because they're in such distress, but it takes a willingness to look at what's going on, and the easy answer, and I say this with all grace and compassion, the easy answer would be to have something be wrong with your dick. It is
Totally.
just so rarely that. There's something wrong with your life.
Totally.
And in that situation that you just described, you've got to start talking to your partner, right? Like you have to communicate about what's going on for you. Why are you feeling constricted, restrained, without freedom? Because your partner might be feeling the same thing, and you guys are going to figure out a way to have freedom.
Totally. And I think it's like, again, this pro-symptom approach, it's like, it's telling me that I need to cultivate a kind of sovereignty or autonomy in myself that's not dependent on this person's like perception of me. There's a lot to like grow into, so it can be a really powerful growth process. And
Yeah.
I mean, I've had like, times in my own relationship in which like I'm feeling really disconnected and I don't have a lot of erotic energy in my body. And my dick's not really responding that well. And then when I'm feeling really awesome, and for me personally, when I'm feeling really close to him, that's when I'm functioning, the most. But like you mentioned, men who are like, it's working great in clubs and it's working great in like hookups because there's an emotional distance there. And when the emotions get closer, it's like, oh my God, this is terrible. This is scary.
Yeah. Yeah.
This must be like frustrating on the other side too, as a woman to encounter that in men. Have you encountered that in men in your life?
Yes, yes, for sure. And it's, I don't think many of us have the desire to own someone. Autonomy is so sexy. Self-agency is so sexy. Sexual agency is so sexy. So then when we can get into the space of like sharing fantasies instead of presuming that we know everything sexually that our partner wants to do, sharing fantasies, like saying those deepest, darkest things, if it's a solid enough, trusting enough relationship to do that, there's just so much eroticism that can exist there. So you really are coming together in a way that's more like this instead of like this, because this is much sexier, when
Totally.
you can be in this space instead of this codependence.
Totally. The little baby monkey cling is what I call that. Don't leave me.
Yeah.
I'm a total baby monkey clinger. Actually, I'm a more anxious about losing than I am about losing freedom. I've typically been a little bit more rebellious and able to access that freedom if I want to, but it's more like, I don't leave me. But I
Yeah.
naturally attract a lot of guys who are scared of losing freedom.
Mm.
You know how that little dance works.
That's a bitch for you, man. But at least you know it now. But at least you
Yeah.
know it. And that's the work. And two, with after the pro-symptom approach, so we're really getting curious with our dicks about what are you saying that I can't, figuring out what great sex is to you, because most people don't define great sex as just a good orgasm. Like I've never in my practice met anyone who's like, yep, the whole thing, it's just about having an orgasm. People, that's just not it.
Mm-mm. Totally. What do you recommend as some holistic ways for penis owners to get in touch more with their cocks and work in these existential layers? Like, what are some ways to progress if he's noticing something's not really functioning in the way that I want? Where does he
Yeah.
start?
Finn, in the past, you and I have talked a little bit about the sexual template work, which is in the book. So really looking
Mm-hmm.
at desire and arousal. Desire, the psychological process of wanting; arousal, the physiological process of wanting. And I feel like a really safe foundational way to do that is through the five senses.
Totally.
So you're asking, what do I find sexy and what turns me on? Sight, smell, taste, hearing, touch, leather, feathers, a martini, um,
Sweat.
sweat, like
Yeah. Yeah.
beards, like whatever it is. So just getting in touch with those cues that are in life before you make it just purely genital. Because when we make it just genital and our penis isn't doing what we want it to do, then like it's gone off the rails already. So I encourage people, like, let's look at the eroticism in life, that arousal, that desire, start there, and then gradually over weeks, so maybe 4 to 6 weeks, bring it into the genital and sexual realm. Yeah.
Totally. I love that exercise is page 123 in the book.
Oh, nice. Good.
So
Glad
yeah,
you know.
123, 123 through 126. And I know that because I was really excited about that and was jotting down some notes there for a couple of my clients. But I love it because you're talking about building a context around what we're doing with the body that is acknowledging all the different streams and layers that are really creating those moments versus like the physiological genital that's kind of like, I don't know, why won't my car drive and only looking at the tire?
Right. Oh, I love that.
Like something's wrong with my car. Like, have you got it? Have you looked at the engine ever? Like, what's going on here? One more thing I want to ask you about intentional self-pleasure, because I'm a big proponent of that, and I'll kind of share my model here in a second. I want to ask like how you recommend people start to develop that practice.
So this, I call it a self-pleasure protocol, intentional self-pleasure. You and I are talking about the same thing, but for really any client that I'm working with, even if I'm seeing a couple, I will talk to them about their self-pleasure protocol. And I am not saying masturbation because I'm afraid of saying masturbation. Masturbation, I can say it all day, but it's different. Like it's not that, because masturbation is usually generally based and about reaching orgasm. A self-pleasure protocol is again about using all the senses, the entire body, all of our erogenous zones, really taking time weekly, multiple times a week. For some people, this is going to be daily. For some people, it'll be once a week. That's fine. Wherever you land is completely normal, but really figuring out what feels good to your body and in your body.
Totally. It's like a touchstone, like of
Mhm.
kind of like the real experience you're having versus the performance desire.
Yes.
I like try to pitch it in a way for men where it's like, I'm not saying that don't grab your porn and whack off. I'm not making it about
Right.
right or wrong. I'm not saying that. I'm saying like, try something different. Set that over here, come back to it as you want to, and but like make time to discover what feels, like you said, what feels good to me. Can I even like stay focused on, you brought up presence. Like, can I stay focused on sensation and what it feels like inside of me and where that leads me versus like what I'm doing or what I look like? Because tell guys to get in the mirror
Yeah.
on purpose to try to retrain this, like, we get in the mirror, we're like, something here,
Yeah.
kind of like,
Yeah.
oh God, I need to plug my, and it's just like the automatic response to seeing yourself is like what needs to change.
Mm.
And that sucks. It's so can you use the mirror to see yourself and like really tune in and like what you're feeling inside yourself, just kind of witness that. And it helps build this like, like a feedback loop that's affirming, I think.
Absolutely.
You get in sex
And
and then you can kind of touch that again. What are you going to say?
yeah, just building erotic flexibility. It's
Hmm.
a phrase that I love using. And with all my men, I just got off the phone with one. I was like, "Tell me about how you masturbate." And he's like, "What are you talking about?" It's like I put my hand. And I'm like, "No. Like, do you use porn? Are you using your memory, past historical sexual experiences? Do you see he was straight? Do you see a girl in the gym and you go there? Do you use erotica? Like, do you use art? And so like that's erotic flexibility, because if you go to porn every time, fine, but boring. To me, boring. Like, it's just not that interesting. And when you build up that erotic flexibility with imagination, pictures, stories, past historical, fantasy, it just becomes such a rich landscape.
Totally. You want to be able to kind of access a different side of self a lot, because if your only way to access pleasure is by yourself with your device laying on your back, same position, and then it's like, are you surprised that it's kind of difficult to express when you're with a person? Like they don't it's a big, way big difference just to the somatic level.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. And this is the same for men and women, I just want to say.
Mhm.
So the story is, oh, men can get off anywhere, anytime. Some men, sure, but that's true of some women too. But if a man masturbates the same way every single time, a woman masturbates the same way every single time, they're going to have equal trouble getting off in a different way with a partner. It's just true.
I totally agree. And what you just said, and we don't have time for it, but I'm gonna put this out in space for another
Yeah.
time, is like the energetic phallus or like the energetic vulva, that like men have an energetic vulva and women have this energetic phallus. And it's just like this is about energy and about imagination. It's not about like a physical part. And I'd love to talk
Right.
about that in the future if you want.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it. So your dick is fine. I'll sign off with
My
that.
dick is great.
I don't know about your spin, but
It's good for me to say that out loud because I, like all men, have questioned that too. So if you're out there watching this and you have questions, like maybe do a little digging on the layers about what you're carrying emotionally.
and you just gave him a great mantra. You gave everybody a great mantra. My dick is fine. My dick is great.
Totally. Thank you so much for making time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me with you again, and I look forward to next time.
Bye.
Cool. Bye.